lab. And this is the concept to impact financial inclusion, market competition, and consumer protection. So I'll hand over the mic to you, Lisa. Oh yes, we also have another speaker. Please, Shadrach Kiprono from Branch is the head of credit and analytics. Karibu. I think we have.
You've got all of us.
Yes, I'll give you a microphone. So, Betsy, you're good to go?
I'm ready.
All right.
So I apologize about the voice. I spent much of the evening last night with a few of you down on the beach, as well as with the frogs, and I think I might have eaten one. So, hence the frog sound in my voice. It's wonderful to have been with all of you the past two and a half days, frankly 2 weeks. The team and I have been in Kenya over the past 2 weeks, meeting with many of you one-on-one, as we've been exploring the potential value and the opportunity around engaging with you in conversations around data and technology, but really around data and its possibilities for driving greater financial inclusion, especially for very small businesses and women-owned small businesses. So Jared and Jared has been our guide, so thank you, Jared. Jared and I thought that it would be really fruitful to round out the 2.5 days with you by hearing some reflections from some of the individuals who moderated the conversations. And so you're going to hear that. And I and the FinRec Lab team are going to be listening closely, because what we're hoping to gather from both the conversations and sort of the closeout discussion, but then also from all of you, what are some of the core themes in these 2 months? So I've got a few slides. I'll be pretty quick. I think you guys might be slide fatigued at this point. Let me just look at them myself, because I think there is some important information in here. One of the things I want to make sure that we are a nonprofit, independent research organization today or the day before. And we do believe in the value of technology and data for financial inclusion, but ultimately evolving the safe, responsible, and inclusive use of data and technology means that industry stakeholders, NGOs, and frankly, really importantly, we know this, policymakers and regulators are engaged in conversations about what that set of rules of the road ultimately look like. And so we, as a nonprofit research organization, we spend a lot of time engaging with industry stakeholders, both to have conversations about things like the market dynamics that are affecting access to the safe and the consumer protections associated with data use, as well as engaging in actual empirical research, which then gives us all a level of grounding to understand, okay, how is this useful or not? And in what ways is it, for instance, predictive in better credit risk assessing more people who otherwise we might leave out? So this reflects just much of what you just heard me say. We bring all those stakeholders to the table, and that's what we're here to do and engage with you in. I mentioned, and you all saw my deep dive on some of the research we've already done on a form of alternative data, that is cash flow data, transaction activity from, in the case that we looked at, bank accounts. It could be prepaid cards, general purpose prepaid cards, and obviously it very well could be mobile payments, transaction activity. The thing that I didn't tell you about is typically after we do working group conversations, then we undertake the research with industry stakeholders. We then spend a lot of time really thinking about the policy implications, and we do that with direct engagement with regulators. So when we did that cash flow research in the US, the regulators were sitting at the table as observers, formally as observers. They didn't have to say anything, but they got to listen and learn as the dialogue was happening between industry stakeholders and others. And at the end of the work that we did on cash flow in the US, we actually had all of the federal regulatory agencies in the US This includes both the prudential regulators, the Fed, the OCC, which is our big bank regulator, and our Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, our big consumer protection agency, come together and issue a statement at regulated institutions calling out cash flow data as an important, valuable data source for financial inclusion. So these aren't, we do this, we're not driving towards policy prescriptions or recommendations, we are a facilitator. But I do believe, and this is based on my own experience, sitting in the US Treasury Department for 4.5 years, this most recent stint, that it's really hard to understand how to move without facts under you. And I think that's what the research we had done helped to stimulate in the US. So, exciting to be with you all, exciting to embark upon this work with you. I say that on behalf of inform all of us through this facilitated discussion process that we will undertake with you. It is to help inform the policymakers and the industry stakeholders. It is also, in part, to begin conversations about how we might embark on an empirical research project with you. So know that up front. One of the most important things about us, we're transparent, and that is something that we are interested in exploring with you. And then out of the working group process that we are going to be undertaking, we're going to then produce a report that captures our writing of what we've learned, which is quite important. We're not a trade association, we're not a consultancy, but we are a fairly, I would say, fairly smart, quick learners, independent organization that really is trying to help the collective. And so those in the end will be the words that we'll be writing on the page, which results in this market context report. I've talked through this, you'll see it in the slides. So the working groups, what do we have in mind? I think this reflects much of the conversation we've been having these past 2 days. We are anticipating 2 distinct working groups. One is to focus specifically on alternative data and the market dynamics of alternative data. The other is to really hone in on very small businesses. I keep getting the order wrong. MSMEs. Sorry about that. But very small businesses, and to really understand how these micro small businesses, and ideally to look at women-owned small businesses, how data and insights and market dynamics may really help to drive, and government engagement. I'm looking at some of you in the audience. Those important components that really may have a beneficial effect on access to responsible credit for those very small businesses. So what are we saying here? I think I've talked through much of this, but those are the 2 distinct working groups that we aim to set up. When we've done these in the US, we have had people who participated in both. I will tell you now, some of you have already signed up to be a part of these conversations, but part of the discussion we want to have is really to entice you and to engage you and motivate you to be a part of these conversations. Representation, it's really important, and I think these 2 days have really conveyed that. The value of having diversity of points of view, of voices, frankly, to be able to hear each other, but also to push each other. And so that is very much a part of each of these working groups that we will be facilitating. And so I'm going to just leave this up here. These are some of the topics that we anticipate we will be digging into with you vis-a-vis each of these working groups. But what is really important for today is to hear from you. What else, what are we missing? What sits underneath any of these particular bullets? And we're going to warm you up by starting off a conversation with folks here who've been a part of these discussions and hear their reflections on what we heard over the past 2 days, 2.5 days. And hopefully that will be stimulating for you as you give us feedback on what should we really be making sure to grow. So with that, I am going to, and then Jared, do you want to say anything at the top, or do you want to wait towards the end? Okay, perfect. Great. So, Juliet, I'd love to start with you. You and I had a quick chat yesterday. You've been deep on issues around data access, underwriting for a long time, frankly longer than I realized. I'd love to hear some of your reflections on what you've heard over the past 2 days. And to be clear and fair too, it doesn't have to sit within these two categories. I think we want to make sure that we're hearing reflections overall. But again, we will be listening closely for insights that would help to inform.
Okay. Where do I start? I was just telling Natalia, it was a very interesting conference. Sometimes you come to a conference and you think I'll step out, but actually there was no session that I wanted to miss. Each session was really relevant and we got such thought-provoking insights out of each of the sessions. So I just want to spend time more on what I would have loved to see more of, and hopefully it also ends up in there. So about 5 points. One is I would have loved to see a little bit more focus on that financial inclusion part of that theme, at least for this study. And what I mean is looking at things like more conversations around, say, women and granular data, or disaggregated data. And so conversations around bringing women into this conversation. 2 is around when we're talking about credit scores, looking at the aspect from the borrower's perspective or the consumer's perspective and say, moving beyond just giving them a score, but looking at a borrower, say in this market, in Kenya, not being able to take their score from one institution to another and shop around. So right now what we're seeing is a borrower that wants $100 in the morning to buy stock, and sells and pay. So are they really thinking about their score at 5 a.m. in the morning? Are they able to take this score from branch to Tala and back in terms of the pricing? So this conversation on risk-based pricing, moving beyond just from supply side, but even to the consumer, how then they can be able to take it and shop around. Issues on consent and how we can empower this borrower to actually understand what they are consenting to when they're talking about access to their data. So we did have warning, and what's between them and $100 is access to data within their phone. So even as they consent, do they really understand what they're consenting to and the implications of that, and where their data ends up, and the decisions it informs. And then something that I just wanted to throw back to the room at the risk of limiting my career as Colin said. It's around the hustler fund. It was interesting, and I think we see it over and over again. It was interesting to see that we're talking about 6 million potential borrowers that were locked out by the big banks. Yes, these are the big banks that are now the partner financial institutions in the fund. When do we bring on board the other type of financial institutions, the branches, the tellers, microfinance, that actually understand this customer, that as we had, we want them to use the data and customize and tailor-make these products. But we're giving the partners that we're working with, and the partners that actually lock them out, are partners that probably the risk of being short do not share data. So Hustler Fund is sitting with a lot of data. access to that data is something I just put out there.
Great, fantastic. And that is exactly the kind of just honest, put it on the table and let's talk about it, points of view that are all.
Thank you to the organizer of the conference because it's been very insightful. Things that we have discussed more or less covered 3 degrees of the issues around information sharing as well as credit extension. Most so highlighting the importance of the regulatory side, the market side, and even the generation of products that are actually solutions. Because I'll say somebody over coffee that the most important part of this conference is at least the meeting between problems and solutions. And a host of solutions that have been paraded. And I'm sure this was just a sample of problems and a sample of problems, so of solutions that can be offered. But the most important bit is really the promotion of financial inclusion is right now we are at 84%, say in Kenya, it's at 84%. So the question is, what's the next move? So the next level in financial inclusion now has to be deepening utilization of financial services, focusing on special groups. Of course, that now starts to highlight the role of women, the uniquenesses around women that will need to be structured in the mainstream finance as well as other solutions coming in. Of course, as we talk about women, we saw evidence yesterday about probability of defaults from women, much more significantly different from that of men. But the challenge that we have in the banking sector is many of the products, I can't say all, because there are banks that have moved into that space to customize products for specific groups, the youth, the women, people living with disabilities. Because just about a month ago, we actually launched one bank was issuing a loan for SMEs that are run by the deaf, and giving them at 1% per annum. And we thought that's an innovation, because one is about identifying the uniquenesses within special groups and being able to structure products that then meet those special groups. And even at the same time, just about a week ago, so we had a session for Islamic finance, because in as much as there is a promotion of conventional finance, there is also emerging great market for Islamic finance. And of course, with that, we speak about the issues of, is the regulatory environment, is the supervisory environment adequate to promote the emergence of finance that speaks to and provides solutions to the special groups in our midst. Juliet has mentioned about the disaggregations in data, because at the moment, there's a lot of aggregations, and of course in aggregations a lot is hidden. And of course when we start digging in, and I think I like the project because we are pursuing special groups, and therefore we open the boxes and be able to discuss the uniquenesses in special groups and how best to address them. And even now, as we open the space from structured to unstructured data, it becomes even much more interesting. And one other thing that came up in the discussions was the issue of, as we move away from structured to unstructured, alternative data, so to say, what's the regulatory environment like for this space? Because the regulator now will be much more keen to speak about issues around consumer protection, because we're expanding to widen the data capture concerning consumers at a segregated level. So ideally then we'll be keen to know and have a mapping of the regulatory environment. What does it speak, even from prudential guidelines as well as other regulations in the market, to identify the challenges and opportunities within the laws and regulations that then promote the capture of alternative data for purposes of credit underwriting. Then the other issue is opportunities within digitization, and of course with digital loans and even the emergence of some of the solutions such as what the government has done. I think Madam PS yesterday gave us some numbers of within 100 days there was over 10 billion shillings that had been extended. Just a case of a creation of a new framework for lending outside the formal lending structures, and how that has picked up within a very short time. And of course, that speaks volumes about there's a possibility that within the regulatory environment, there could be some constraints that then can unlock the market if we pursue some amendments in the regulatory environment that then opens up a space for greater uptake of credit. And as we speak about the issues around consumer protection, of course, it will also be very interesting, even in the study, to also look at the aspects of the data protection laws, to what extent are they restrictive of supporting the markets to extend more credit, as well as also, even as we speak about the data protection laws, and now, as I mentioned yesterday in our panel, we're talking about the issues of dispute resolution mechanisms also become very central, because at the point of promoting customer protections, there is also an aspect of the event that there is a dispute, and particularly where we're moving away from conventional products to non-conventional products in digital platforms. Consumer protection laws will need to be put in place, but then in the event of a dispute, what happens? So again, a highlight of the dispute resolution mechanisms then become very important, both in the formal as well as also alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. So in all this, I think in our discussions right from Wednesday through today, we find a lot of promise. And of course, in the promise, we say we need now to transition from too much talk to creating solutions. And as we create solutions, the players are in here. And I think we need to encourage more of these discussions. And we are very happy to be part of the discussions around the project, the discussions around the studies. Any research emerging, I think we're in for it. So on behalf of the Kenya Bank Association, we promise our participation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shadrach Krono. I know everybody here has been on a panel in the last few days, but I haven't. I'm the head of Credit and Analytics with Branch Microfinance Bank. Branch is a digital lender in the space, so we are definitely one of the players at this conference specifically addresses. And we'd really like to thank both Melissa and Janet from CIS Kenya for bringing this up. And a couple of things that I'd like to talk to. First of all, the use of alternative data. As a digital lender, and I'm sure even the other digital lenders here, this is a very interesting topic for us because, yes, we use the structured data that is available from Credit Bureaus, Metropolitan Union, and Credit Info. However, we've come to realize that the other data that can be acquired from the customers, especially something like cash flow analysis, is very important. It's a really big tool. In the banking sector, bankers will use bank statements from other banks or their own systems to predict risk and whatnot. However, in Kenya, we have a really big advantage, and that is the use of mobile money. Actually, mobile money has more penetration in the financial market than the banking system itself. And this data is really important in predicting a customer's risk and people characteristics. So with partnerships with companies like organizations like Regtech, and things like the use of machine learning, like the representative from Finwood told us yesterday, using this, we really have an advantage in the use of alternative data to price people on their risk. So this one opens up a lot of the unbanked population. From 2 days ago, we are told about there are 3 kinds of people. There is the credit visible ones, the credit invisible ones, and of the credit visible ones, there are those who do not have access to credit because their available financial data is not enough to extend credit to them. So it now comes up to people like us, that's Branch, and other digital lenders to use alternative data that they can get from these customers and extend credit to them. And then with this, the moment you start extending small credit to them, their credit scores start building up, and then they should now be able to access bigger term credit from big banks. So really, the use of alternative data will really push financial inclusion to all the sectors in the market. The other thing I want to talk about now is regarding alternative data. We are going to need a lot of, let's say discussions between us, the customer, and regulators regarding data protection. I remember I was talking with Chris from Cisco yesterday, or the previous day, about when an individual comes in with their downloads a digital lending app on the phone, they will not, 99% of them will not read the terms and conditions of which data we're going to collect and how we are going to store this data, or how we are going to use the data to make a credit decision. Because at that point, this person has not been able to access credit from any other source, any other, let's call them the formal banking sector. So they are now going to use digital lenders. So they are in a real need for the cash. So they will not look at the way their data is used. And with this, it gives rise to, unscrupulous lenders can now use this data in a very bad way. And as it is right now, we do not have the kind of regulation that we need in the market to manage the use, storage, and the storage and the use of the data. So we are going forward in the coming periods, we are going to need a lot of insights, a lot of discussions, and a lot of roundtable discussions with all the players in the sector regarding the use of the kind of data that we access from people's phones, basically. And then another thing, if I remember correctly, back when credit bureaus were starting, one of the main challenges to it was pushback from banks themselves, because they were not ready to share the data that they have on their customers. They felt that it was giving unfair competition to their competitors, without thinking that in as much as you're giving them your data, your soul basically, they are also giving you their data, and we are all able to access together to make the market more open for everyone, to price risk better and whatnot. So yes, we have a few bureaus in Kenya. So I wonder, and I'm sure this discussion will come up in this long group here, the possibility in the future of having alternative data use. That is the one thing. When I read the theme of this conference, that is the one thing I was really interested in. Discussions of the use. I don't know if it's possible, if it's something we should even be thinking about, the possibility of having alternative data bureaus. Because all of us have different analysis that we do when we get these data from our clients. And in the same way that while the three bureaus, when they take your financial data, they take your credit history, some of them will check your banking history, look at it, collate it, and generate a score for you. Now imagine a future where the score that we generate internally using the financial data that we get, what if the different digital lenders in the market, they could also make their own score, and then we share the data to a central bureau where an overall score can be made. This one will really open up the market, because considering the impact of mobile money in Kenya, imagine having a score based on your performance with the mobile money, especially the two big players, that's Fuliza and Shwari. I'm sure if you talk to any digital lender here, they will tell you that their machine learning models are based a lot on the data we get from Pesa, Fuliza, and Shwari. Now imagine having this data on a shared platform, of course with enough regulation on how to, just like the way the trade regulations, having one for alternative data. This would be really helpful. And then finally, what my panelists mentioned here the impact of the hustler funds going forward on alternative data. One of the things I'm sure a lot of people are really interested in is how the government has been able to score people before giving them limits on the hustler fund, for example. It's very interesting because once we are currently looking at, we are actually trying to analyze the impact of that, of the hustler fund on our own portfolios, on how it predicts risk in our own portfolio. And these are some of the things that is going to affect all the children as going forward. And these are some of the things that that thing I've mentioned of having an alternative data bureau, if we are ever able to get that as part of alternative data, yes, it is like giving up our data to competition, but looking at it from the perspective of, it also gives us a better way of pricing risk. And this will, of course, help us now in talking to our consumers, be able to access bits of the market that they have been able to access before, and specifically that bit of financial inclusion to both the unbanked and the credit invisible, and the credit visible who are still not able to access credit. So yeah, part of this work group, we are really interested in this, and we will definitely be there.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I see you. Not sure I should be saying something now, maybe a little later, but I think this would be really appropriate time to say that this study was something we thought was timely. And when I got an opportunity to meet the chief guest that I was targeting for this conference, he did ask me what are the objectives of the conference and what are the outcomes anticipated. So I fumbled explaining what I thought the conference was going to be about. I wasn't quite ready for the question. I thought it was more of a social meeting, but it was so specific. And when I told him about, the outcome, or rather one of the expectations post the conference is this study, and he was like, what is it about and why do you want the study? I realized that after 2 sentences I had lost him in terms of his concentration. His mind was really busy. I could see that you needed to be very clear, very quickly, what is this study about? And looking at all this, I might have mentioned some of these things, but now on hindsight, I think if I was better prepared, I would have said more articulate things like, anyhow, he said, so what do you want? I said, would you please come and launch the study? Would you like to come and launch the conference? And after a few minutes, I realized he was like, what again do you want? What exactly do you want? I said, but I thought I've said it. So he was like, really, why do you want this study? And why do you want this conference? I'm glad to hear that some of the objectives of the conference have been met. But he thought that it made sense. Some of the things I said were that I thought we should be now moving towards more away from rudimentary conversations about what kind of data should inform credit decisions and credit scoring, and get into more sophisticated and predictive data. And so I said something like, we need to define the relevant alternative data for our market. We need clear definitions. We need to know what is the data that is really valuable, really predictive in our market. And the reason for that is that, what is predictive for us may not be predictive in other markets. What we might consider alternative data today may not be alternative data tomorrow, and so we need a definition for today. What we consider alternative data today in this market may not be alternative data elsewhere. So I said the study should help us to define, have a relevant and current definition of alternative data, considering that transitionary progression over time, we need to know what is useful for today. And it must be fit for purpose, because for the suppliers of that data, the users of that data will need to be fit for purpose. The suppliers would want to know what is in it for them. Why should they invest at all to collect this data in a manner that can be used by credit providers? So that supply side, what levels of automation would be needed by those who have the data and need to give it? So if the requirement is high, then it's going to be expensive for them to package that data for use, and we need to understand what levels of automation are necessary for access to that data and to make it of good quality. And so I thought I explained that the study is good. I hope I did, because at the end of it, he said, I think that's a good study. So right now, I think I didn't explain it, but on hindsight, I think maybe I did.